Hello, everybody, and welcome to the KOps Office Hours bi-weekly meeting. Today is Friday, November 6th, 2020. I am your moderator, facilitator, Justin Santa Barbara. I work at Google. A reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be put on the internet, uploaded to YouTube. And to please be mindful of our code of conduct. We do have an agenda whose link I am pasting now into our chat. There are a couple of things on there, and please feel free to add other things, and feel free to add your name for anyone that is watching the video and wants to correlate that back. And otherwise, I think we can jump straight into things. We had a couple of action items from last time. We had a release of 1.18.2, sort of a patch release in our 1.18 stable series, which I believe I did. And we had a plan to do 1.19.0 beta 1. I think that we had some blockers that I don't think we fully resolved, or we had some things we weren't entirely clear on whether they were resolved or not. I think we're in better shape on that, but as far as I know, that did not happen. So that is where we stand. We didn't do the release, is what I mean. Sorry.
Yes, I was hoping mostly to get in the launch template changes so that it's part of the beta. Also, maybe the ACM patch that Peter is working on, and we tried it together, but probably we'll have more time during the weekend or something. So to get it at least more stable to be part of the beta. But other than that, I don't think that there are major issues there. So next week, probably I can do the beta one.
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, sorry, stammering. At this point, I think we're only reviewing the action items, but yes, so like that would be wonderful. I think we have a couple of items on there to like figure out any remaining blockers, but I think, yeah, that sort of timing of doing it next week would be great. I think there are a couple of things which we hope to squeeze in under the wire, but if we don't squeeze them in, I agree that it is probably time. I wanted to therefore move us on to our open discussion topics. The first one is it's perhaps slightly difficult one from Peter to decide on the next alternative time meeting.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. When do we want to meet next?
Absolutely. So we're not yet replacing this time slot, and we're talking about our out-of-band meetings now that we have exited Hacktober or October. Are there any proposals that we are sort of choosing between, or?
I feel like the times that we did during October are reasonable enough to consider.
Yeah, I just didn't know whether we wanted to try to pick maybe a different one that, you know, it feels like they all feel like similar times. So I don't know if we want to try to pick a different time to see if we do get other people showing up, as it were. But I'm happy with all the times. Worked great for me, which is not a prerequisite, but they did all work for me, so I'm amenable.
Well, it's a bit hard to get times that people can drop in from both Europe and US, so it's a very narrow thing. So if you want to try something that suits more US, and maybe there won't be people from EU, maybe you can try that also to see if people are joining also from West Coast.
I mean, I think the geography which I think we might want to see if there are people on is sort of the Asia geography, which I think we basically exclude with this time zone. Maybe that's not true. Like right now it is, yeah, no, it is midnight in China, like East China, for example.
I don't think there's a good, I mean, for Europe, it's not that bad to get to reasonable hours with China, but for US, I think it's a bit harder.
Okay, well, why don't we don't have a solid proposal for a Asia-friendly time zone. We can try to see if one arises and if there's any demand. Maybe we can ask in COPS users, but in the meantime, why don't we pick one that's more in our standard menu that we've chosen from, and I am happy to go with whatever time other people would like.
So I think it was 9 a.m., right? Your time that it's 9 a.m.?
Yeah. I think we were saying yes. No, I mean, we did 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. I think we did both of those times. Those are Eastern, so 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. Pacific. I can't remember if we did any other times.
But I think 9 a.m. it's kind of okay for Europe and may get something from,
Right.
I don't know, other time zones,
Okay.
early ones. So the hour is pretty much that, and we just have to choose not from many days.
Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday is always tricky for me with school, but Tuesday or Thursday? Thursday?
Let's say Thursday to have more time in between.
Thursday, 9 a.m. All right, I will write that down. I will send out, yeah, I guess I'll send out the same invite. Thank you. And we can see if there's anyone that is in it proposes a sort of more different time slot. Thursday, 9 a.m. Office hours old. Okay. All right, and then I had two items which were basically about like figuring out the 119 beta issues. So I propose we actually look at John. Do you want to mention your one first? You were, because it's probably
okay. Yeah. So this is one where the kops controller bootstrap call doesn't work when the cluster is configured to use the API load balancer from nodes to the master. And so I put together a PR which opens up or adds another listener and opens up security groups. But the problem is if the API server load balancer is external, the security groups don't help because the traffic is actually exiting the cluster and then coming back in. So we have basically, I think we have choices. One is we open up, in that case, we open up the kops controller port externally, which I don't like. The other possibility is we make people in this mode pay for a second load balancer so that they have an internal load balancer in addition to an external one. And the third one is we use a separate DNS controller managed domain for the bootstrap protocol.
So the third option would effectively ignore the use for internal API setting for the bootstrap process. Is that correct?
For the bootstrap, we would not use that setting, and we would always use the DNS controller internal, with the disadvantages of that.
Just a question. How likely is someone to use external load balancer for internal API?
Well, apparently our reporter did.
Let's not go there. So he tries many things. That's not meaning that those are recommended or we should support all the use cases. So when you say a second load balancer for that, I'm like, I don't want another one. It's already a mess trying to configure the ones that we have already. So I don't know.
If you want to talk to your API server from outside, you need an external load balancer.
or DNS.
Yes, but using it for internal API, that's what I mean. Like, what do you gain? You make it slower to get to the outside, to get back in on the inside.
Apparently what you gain is it's a lot more responsive when you change your master's IP address, when you do a rolling update. That seems to be the reason why we have this feature. The DNS propagation delay gets rid of it.
I don't know, it will get fairly complicated once you throw NLB into the mix, the new one. So
first I was like, why do we have this feature? And then, okay, that's why we have it.
One of the things I've been thinking about, and I'm not saying we should make this like, it's more of a directional comment. For the ingress, there are like multiple ingress methods and like potential methods, and I feel like we could end up with a list of ingress for the API server, right? You could have a DNS, you could have something that's only accessible over VPN, you could have a load balancer, you could end up with like different parameters for each. And I'm thinking mentally that we want to maybe trend towards that, or even one day separating them out of the cluster, which might make it like, obviously that's a much longer term thing. And maybe the same thing applies for internal. Maybe we at least mentally have a list of these things, and that list, the internal one, is completely separate from the external one, and then we somehow enable them to share a load balancer for the economy case.
Yeah, because I don't think we can use the Kubernetes service discovery, because this needs to be up before Kubernetes. Can't just talk to the IT.
I don't know. I think in the end, probably the easiest is to have another load balancer.
Yeah, but they cost.
I don't know. Life is tough. You want more high availability, you have to pay for it. Otherwise, you have the DNS one.
Yeah.
And because of NLB, we can just attach the same target groups. Right?
Target groups would make sense, yeah.
You can't share target groups across load balancers, but we could define the same target group twice.
Okay, I was under the impression that you can do something, but okay. Then we will have quite a lot of new things in there. Anyway, it's probably the thing to do, but I would say give access to 0000 for 119. So special case, and let's try to add an issue and maybe work on this in 120. Or I don't know if you have a better idea.
There's a lot of echoes of the client search stuff here.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Well, yeah, it's not too surprising.
Yeah.
We have a lot of options.
Yeah, I feel like, thank you for raising this. I feel like I personally don't have an obvious answer. I feel like I'm going to take a look at the issue. I feel like NLB, the second load balancer, is a reasonable answer, but I agree it costs. I feel like the DNS is also a reasonable answer. I really worry about opening the port, but maybe I shouldn't worry about that. Maybe we should just make sure it's actually safe to open the port, because it's a better policy to be.
So it sounds like it might be, we have a new option which says how you load balance the kops controller, and try to sort of separate it from the API server load balancer strategy. Because it sounds like you want to independently choose the two strategies.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's just too confusing.
Well, otherwise you're going to get this trying to tell people what they're going to get when they set something.
Do the masters themselves bootstrap through the kops controller?
No.
Okay. Because we did have, with the cert issue, we're having limitations where if you have your load balancer be internal, you can't have it be an NLB and used for API, because you can't hairpin requests. So traffic from the masters can't go through the NLBs if they're internal.
Do we have that one written down, by the way? Because that issue written down, because that was I think that one's come up before and we thought it was fixed, but maybe it wasn't fixed.
It's only if you register the NLB targets via instance ID, not IP address, but auto scaling group attachments to target groups can only be done by instance ID, not IP address. So my cert pull request includes API validation for those scenarios.
Okay, cool.
And it will be very awkward if people run kubectl on the masters and, well, end up on doing the hairpinning thing and the API not responding.
I think the master kube configs always point to localhost, don't they?
Okay, so that would work. I guess we could fake it here, and I think the only problem that we have is the kubelet config. So if we don't config that to go to the load balancer, probably we can get away with it. So when you enable use for internal API, it does two things. One is set the DNS, the API address on the kubelet, and one set the DNS records. We could still set the DNS records, and anything on the worker nodes or whatever in there would go to the load balancer, but the kubelet could be made less load balanced. Go to DNS, go to local.
I'm a little confused. Are we talking about John? Are we talking about the issue that John raised, or are we talking about the certificate issue at this point?
I think we're moving to certificate.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, on John's issue, just one thing that occurred to me. We control the client when it's talking to kops controller, so we can set our own like HTTP retry policies or things like that. So that is one potentially saving grace we have there. That we are much more at liberty to do fancy stuff, I'd say. Like if the reason that people don't like DNS is because of the propagation delay, we could introduce a much more aggressive, first of all, we could just bypass DNS and just like look it up in EC2. I'm not very keen on that, but we could also like introduce much faster TCP retries of the different HTTP retries of the different IP addresses and things like that. Anyway, I will thank you for raising that, John. I will definitely take a look at that. I agree that we certainly want to split the options. We don't want to. We don't want to honor the option that doesn't work. Yeah, whether we need a separate field or whether we can find some strategy that actually is fine, like that might be.
I think the first thing we do is to split it to a different domain name and not necessarily give an option. So you're always using DNS for kops controller, and then we can, as an additional feature, if someone wants to use a load balancer for that, implement that at such time.
That sounds reasonable because we do always populate the DNS, right?
I do not know.
I think we do.
Okay.
That's a good question. And Cyprian, then, do you want to talk more about what you were talking about before I sort of interrupted you? I apologize for that.
I don't know if it's okay for the ACM case to not set the API to the load balancer for the kubelet. So if we wouldn't set it there, probably we can remove the restrictions. What do you think, Peter?
Can you elaborate on that?
So when you set the use for internal API, it does two things. One is the DNS records that we are clear on what they do. And one is setting some API address in kubelet parameters. It sets it to the load balancer instead of local 127.0.0.1. So if we would not set it to load balancer and we keep the kubelet to talk only to the local API server, something, then it would work with internal, with NLB and ACM.
Isn't the whole point of use for internal API to force the kubelets to use the load balancer in the case of master rolling updates?
Just the kubelets, not anything else?
I thought the point was for the worker node kubelets. The master kubelets should go 127.0.1 all the time, I would think. Because you know you got an API server there.
That's the way we've built it anyway. Yes. There is a separate discussion. There's a separate argument about whether we should cross, but that's a much bigger change.
Yeah.
So I think on the master, as John says, the kubelets should already have 127.0, the local host address, regardless of any setting that I'm aware of.
Okay. There are so many.
Exactly. But no, I think that's always the case, that like the masters are basically self-contained. Each control plane node is self-contained and talks only to itself. And we don't, for example, have etcd. Etcd is the one where like maybe we should relax that. Like if there's a one bad etcd, like should the API server on that, what should the API server on that node do? And currently it goes into a weird, I guess, effectively read-only state. But it should do something different, but it does not tell currently.
So basically ACM should work also for internal API when used for internal API is set, right?
Yeah.
Should. We should probably check.
Should.
We should.
Not that we have tests for any of this stuff.
I saw actually Peter has a test in progress, or partially in progress, or it looked like it was closed, but that was, so we should get test numbers. That would be nice.
Yeah. We should make sure that the kube config on the node kubelets is set up correctly without the CA cert to match what's being exported by kops export kube config. Or if they're using an NLB, then use the alternative port. I can double check all that.
Cool. I don't know if there's anything more here. It sounds like there's definitely some investigation to be done, some thinking to be done. I agree, John, that like with your notes there about like moving to a separate option and maybe just defaulting, or splitting the options. Should we move on? It looks like, I don't know if Ole's here. Ole added something since the meeting started. Oh, you added it on his behalf. Okay.
Yeah, he asked me to raise the issue. He wants some feedback before he actually starts work so that he doesn't do the work for nothing.
Well, this is very interesting. Okay, can you describe the PR just while I'm bringing it up?
It's not a PR, it's an issue. So my understanding is that for webhooks and metrics server, there is some problem generating the certificates.
Okay, I've done work in this area.
Okay,
which I mentioned on there. This is basically the need to get TLS, primarily TLS server certs, but for components that have basically in-cluster domains. So basically you want a TLS server cert that is signed. I think you want one that's signed by the cluster CA, but you definitely want one that's trusted by things like the API server itself. And I also have use cases you just want to do TLS within the cluster. You want it there. So I wrote, I found and then kind of heavily modified an approver which uses the CSR API of Kubernetes, and also a sidecar which then makes the request for this. So with those components, you can actually, with a service account, you can get a cert for the pod and all the services that that pod is a member of. Now, I have this as sort of a set of separate projects, and I think Ole's trying to do something else. And yeah, I don't know what else to say there.
That what you've described, John, sounds, I mean, separately from this issue, it sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I want that. How do you know which services or which DNS names effectively a service account is allowed to speak?
So basically, I have to give all the pods the ability to list services and pods in their own namespace, because the pod has to generate its own CSR, and that's because of design problems in the CSR approval protocol. So basically, the pod lists all the services that identify in the namespace and finds out what I can't even remember what calls I do, but I basically look at the services and see what maps to that pod. Generate the CSR. Then I also identify the pod in the common name, which is also another problem with the CSR request, is I can't give any sort of information that's not in the CSR, other than what my authenticated identity is. And then the approver then goes and queries the API server to validate all of that.
Cool. I think we looked at this, by the way. There is a trick where you can add additional sections to the CSR, which is, I think, is done by the GCP approver, and it's like a little bit weird. Did we look at this together, Peter? I can't remember. I mean,
you can add additional extensions to the CSR, but that means those extensions have to be issued as part of the cert.
It's like a different, so like the CSR is like, I don't know what it is. It's a multi-part MIME doc. Anyway, it's like, it's a PEM. It's a PEM thing, and you can have multiple PEM sections. And like one of them is a CSR, and then like there's this other one, and like the one that I've seen is Google going and like registering with whoever the authority is, like some additional section. Anyway.
Yeah, you can do extension OIDs, but they end up in the cert.
They do end up in the cert? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
And people will tend to ignore them, but yes.
All right.
So you can put information there, but I did bring up to SIGOF, and I think they understand the use case, but it would be nice if an approver could say, okay, I want you, regardless of what's in the CSR, I want you to issue this cert. But
yes,
that would simplify things greatly. But the other problem I found is for some of the webhooks, the API server expects the cert to have an unqualified domain in the cert.
What is an unqualified domain? What does that mean?
You have to, the domain in the cert has to be the name of the service, not the name of the service.namespace.cluster.local.
Got it.
Yeah.
That almost seems like a bug.
It does seem, but would be a little bit
Is it at
incompatible to
least,
fix.
is it at least service.namespace?
I'm not sure it is.
Stop recording. Right. Let's not talk about that. We'll talk about that some other time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just wonderful.
Yeah. So I had to loosen the security of my approver to be willing to issue unqualified domains in the certs, because otherwise I could not.
I think your projects sound wonderful. I'm definitely going to take a look at them.
Yeah.
Can we circle back to Ole's thing then? So
Yeah.
Ole was saying that this was, I guess, a heavy dependency to take, which, I mean, it sounds like a good dependency. I don't think that's unfair to say that it would be a dependency. And then
He wants some sort of, yeah, he wants to do a CRD, and so you do a CRD, and it looks like it would then maintain a signed cert in a secret somewhere, which has slightly worse security properties, because then anybody who can read secrets in the namespace can get the cert. Whereas mine, it's only things which are selected by a service can get a cert for that service.
yes, but presumably if I can read secrets, I can steal the service account key and do
Okay.
whatever I want anyway, right?
Okay.
But I mean, I think just because the bar is low doesn't mean we can't raise the bar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not wild about introducing a special CRD, like that is security sensitive, like in general, like not just the details, but like.
Well, this looks like it's sort of like a cert manager for internal secrets.
Which is like what you've, right, which is what you've done, right? And
no, it's not a cert manager thing. Cert manager, you have a CRD which specifies a cert in it.
Oh, I see what you, yes.
Cert in a secret. And what I do is you specify you want it and you get it in a volume in your pod.
Perhaps that, so perhaps for Ole, we could say, have you considered cert manager? And then
cert manager can't get certs from the Kubernetes CA.
But it does.
At least not currently. Right.
It supports custom CAs, so we could. Okay.
Yeah.
I also like your
the authorization
model.
problem that it doesn't solve.
I really like your model though of the volume where it doesn't get persisted into a secret. That's nice. All right. Well, I think.
Yeah. I first started with an init container, and then we implemented a mutating webhook that injects the init container, and it could later inject a CSI volume or something, or a flex volume.
Oh, and I think actually what Ole was saying was we don't need the admission controller here for his particular use case, which I think is good, right? So like, I think he's just saying that CSRs are more complex than maybe they need to be, and it doesn't even sound like you. It sounds like you've also hit some problems with CSRs or some challenges with CSRs.
Yes, yeah, because the CSR API is missing features.
Yes, they've built in exactly the surface that they need and no more, because it is a security sensitive API. That would be the nice way to put it, I guess. So like, I wonder if we could should move away from CSR to kops controller, but then we're tied into kops and that flow.
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds like it sounds like Cyprian, I know they were great to raise this point, and we should review this issue a lot as well, like have a discussion on this issue. Because it doesn't sound trivial to reach a conclusion here either.
Maybe he'll next call on Thursday.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to find a call where Ole can show up and.
I mean, I think also like, we don't require synchronous communication in general of our contributors, so we can hopefully have a meaningful conversation on this, and then
Yeah.
like, but yeah, face-to-face is often more efficient. Okay, so the only remaining two things on the agenda that I see are the two that I added, which were about.
Well, actually, I have one more thing to
Go for
point
it.
out is maybe somebody from SIGAUTH might be interested in joining the conversation, but
That is a good point. Yeah. Okay.
and it might make more sense over there, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if like the CSR API we decided whether to make the CSR API a little bit more flexible, or like we get a verdict from them that they are not going to extend the CSR API in any way, shape, or form, and so that, you know, we are right to build something else, and then it's a question of where it belongs exactly. Just gonna loop in SIG-auth. Okay, so unless there's anything else anyone wants to bring up, the other items are around 119.0 beta 1. Okay, so I mean, I put 2 items on here, but I think other than client cert, there are a couple of things we want to squeeze in, but I believe we're looking good for to do a beta sometime next week-ish, early-ish next week, hopefully, and probably have to carve out, it looks like we will probably have to carve out some exclusions for some things. And then I thought we could, like, the most notable one is client cert strategy. So I thought we could just make sure that we're on board with the strategy that we, I think, have more or less decided on. And otherwise, I guess we look at the list of blockers and decide whether any of them are considered critical or blockers for the beta. I think that most of them are nice to haves, except for the first 4, I guess, in the existing blockers list. And I think I want to do client cert separately, but the other, like, I feel like Rodrigo was looking, or is looking after this first one, and he writes a comment that he had a bunch of merge conflicts cherry picking to 118, but is going to try to address them. So I'm assuming that means that the PR itself merged, which I'm just checking.
Yes, and cherry picked to 119.
Perfect. And so he's just referring to cherry picking to 118. Okay, so that's wonderful. So that's not even, so we can almost cross that off the list in terms of 119 blocking. I'm going to look at this issue about clusters. Sorry, I didn't know there's someone. Nope. Okay. I'm always worried I'm talking over people, so if I am, just shout louder. The cluster cannot start with auto version of Kubernetes. I was going to look at this. I did not have the chance. I will take a look at this still. I believe the answer is that I just should do some new images, some of the AMIs, and I'm going to do so. The client cert one I'd like to deal with last, and the max price and mixed instance policy errors with launch templates, I think is still open. I don't know if anyone's looking at this. If no one else is,
There's a duplicate issue, and I left a few comments in the other one. It seems like what their instance group spec looks defined correctly such that it shouldn't run into this error, which makes me wonder if something's happening, like the auto scaling group is using the wrong version of the launch template, or maybe if like nodes are like the auto scaling group needs to be rolled before something can be updated like that. I'm not sure.
Well, I can look into that after merging the launch template versions because I'm still touching that code. So I would know where to look. But probably I will try to reproduce it also, see if I can get into it. I think I noticed some similar things from time to time, but couldn't reproduce easily and was hunting something else at the time. So if they come up with some way of reproducing the issue, then I guess it's easier to fix. Any thoughts? I mean, I can take a look into it if someone wants also.
I'll also try to reproduce it. I think that would be good. And I think I'm not currently using Spot instances, so I would like to keep using Spot instances because it's cheaper. I mean, or whatever they're now called, max price, I guess. But thank you, Cyprian. That's wonderful. Looks like the next one, I'll just sort of traverse the others. Like the next one is NLB support, which looks like it has merged. So thank you to all of your work on that. And it was potentially blocking client cert auth. So we'll come back to that in a minute. There are still there's four etcd manager PRs, which I will take a look at. I think we've unblocked the ARM one, hopefully, Cyprian, if you want to have a look at the approach I took for.
So the problem is that I'm not really blocked. I just want to merge it because it's more commits rebased, so rebasing every time. So that's what I was asking, if we can merge it and put the other one on top.
Yes, we can. I think we can do that. I meant blocked as in like, as I understand it, the current ARM64 PR puts us on an image which isn't entirely supported, and so we have a strategy for getting off of that now.
Okay.
That was and so like if you have a look at that strategy, but I feel like we can. There's enough there that I think we can now merge 334 and your PR, and we don't have to. Don't rebase. You don't have to do that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll look at that. I think I already looked at something similar some months ago when I was trying to build etcd manager. By the way, the etcd to something makes it really annoying to build.
Well, you're not going to. I think you're not going to support it. We're not going to support etcd 2.6 or whatever in.
For ARM, it's in general. So even Jesse tried to build it and had to tell him what to comment so that it can build.
Really?
You're using a special etcd version patch because the 2.2 something, when they released it, was broken and they never fixed it or something.
Are you saying that I mean, we should have etcd manager building from source, like from scratch, right? Is that not the case?
Well, that's a problem because we're using Macs probably. So for us, building it doesn't work. And also it's very old.
It is old, like no one should be using it today if they can, if they have any way to avoid it. I will have a go on the Mac. It should be reproducible. It may not be reproducible on all hardware. It sounds like so. It might be that like the workaround might be to build it inside of Docker on your Mac and make sure you're plugged into the wall before you do that. But
it's easier to just remove it for me. So I always comment the pieces for 2.1 and
okay,
it works perfectly.
okay. All right. Well,
it's a lot of work to get something that I don't use, so don't worry.
Okay. And go ahead. Sorry.
Do we want? Let's finish this because I have a question about kops spec and forgot to write it down.
Okay. It looks like 3 PRs have also merged, and then there's another one that has been raised as a blocker. There was no name on it. I didn't see who typed it.
I did.
Which is about Terraform migration from launch configuration to launch templates, right?
Yeah, because we're flipping the feature flag in 119, if you're using the Terraform output, kops is either going to render a launch configuration or a launch template, depending on the value of the feature flag. The problem is if you have an existing cluster using launch configurations, Terraform would try to delete the launch configuration that's no longer defined and instead create the launch template, but the configuration is still in use by the existing nodes in the autoscaling group. So the two options that I came up with are either have Terraform define both, or sorry, have kops define both launch configuration and launch template, or we have something in the release notes that says remove the launch configuration from the Terraform state manually before doing the Terraform apply. Then it won't delete the launch configuration. And then...
But what is, so sorry, I didn't understand the problem. You create the launch template and the auto-scaling group is modified also.
Yes, but you can't delete the launch configuration until no nodes use it anymore.
Okay, because with launch templates, it doesn't have this problem. So you can delete any launch template and then your ASG will fail if you still didn't change it. While testing launch template versions, I deleted the launch templates to see how recreated. And AWS didn't have any issue with that, the deletion part. It had an issue with auto-scaling, not finding the launch template that it referenced.
Well,
yeah, I think I misspoke. It's reading the issue more. It's not that the nodes need to be rolled. It's that the auto-scaling group, Terraform tries to delete the launch configuration before the auto-scaling group has been updated to use the launch template. And there's no way that we can define that kind of dependency tree in Terraform to ensure that that happens in the correct order.
And what's the problem? It's 0.5 seconds.
Well, the apply fails. The command errors out. I don't know if it eventually succeeds if you retry it or not.
I think it's definitely something we should treat as something we want to figure out for the beta. So I think thank you for putting that in there. That's good. I think I actually thought that what you said was interesting. I thought Terraform had fairly good sequencing overrides. So maybe there is something. I just don't know if we can mess around with that. But there's also a script in there. So I think this is a good issue, and we can look at that and treat it as a likely blocker, or worst case, we have a workaround from looks like users. The one that I definitely wanted to make time for was understanding our strategy for client certificate authentication. I tried explaining this to SIG cluster lifecycle, and in my sort of update to that SIG, and sort of tied myself in knots. So I don't know if our current strategy is. Would you mind reminding me, Peter?
Yes. So the issue is that if a user has specified an ACM certificate for the API load balancer, that effectively breaks the client certificate authentication that we were thinking we were relying on for the kops export kubeconfig. Instead, we were falling back to basic auth. Basic auth is removed in 119, in Kubernetes 119, and so now clients are failing to connect. The solution that we came up with was requiring that anyone specifying an ACM cert and upgrading to 119 needs to use an NLB instead of a classic load balancer. And then what we can do is create a second listener, a second port on the load balancer that does not have the ACM cert on it. And it's instead doing a TCP layer 4 pass-through back to the API servers so that the TLS session is established correctly with the client certificate. And so the pull request that I linked to effectively implements that. I was having issues testing it in Prow. I had Prow requesting an ACM cert and provisioning an NLB, but Prow for whatever reason couldn't, kops validate cluster could connect to the API server correctly, but then the kube control commands would fail. saying connection refused, which seems like a very strange error for a network load balancer. It wouldn't be security group related, or that would be a timeout. And I ensured that the ports were listening, so I'm not sure how a connection refuse happened. But Cyprian was able to test it locally, and it seemed to work. So the pull request implements kind of the basic support for that. It's not all of the reconcile state transitions are implemented correctly. Like if you delete certain things out of band, they may not get fixed correctly. But at least if you're only touching things through the cluster spec, it should work correctly. And then I had to think through a bit the logic behind exporting the kubeconfig. When we generate the kubeconfig user, under what scenarios do we export the client certificate? We were incorrectly exporting it when a user was providing an ACM cert, and so it wasn't being used. I have to decide, do we want to keep doing that, or should we stop doing that? But other than that, I think it's mostly there.
Thank you. That is much. I need you to untie. I need you to untie me up in my knots again. But that is great. Thank you. On the export kube config, I would treat that as a sort of atomic operation. So I wouldn't expect users to export kube config and then like manually change the host, for example. So that's how I think about it. So if you're gonna set a DNS name that is the ACM DNS name, then there's no point in exporting the client config, and therefore the client certificate, and therefore you should not. Everything else sounds great. I think I guess we should ask users whether they something came up which is like, why do users use ACM? And I tried to say it was because, or I offered the reason that it was because then they don't have to worry about certificates and like holding the private key themselves, which I think is true.
We used it at my last job for avoiding having to download the CA cert to everyone's workstations.
Okay. And so it's a real DNS name as well, yes. Although now we're gonna have to do that again, effectively. Oh, well, unless you use some user authentication system. Okay. And I guess the other question is, is this gonna be a default thing, or are users gonna have to like set a field to turn on the second port?
If they specify an ACM cert, they will get API validation errors unless they're also specifying NLB. And then if they are specifying NLB and ACM cert, then they'll automatically get the second listener.
I think that's great for the beta. I can see users saying we don't want to like open this at all because we always want to use this, but I think sounds like that PR will get us to beta, and that will be perfect. Then we can get some feedback on whether users are happy to open that port or not.
Yeah, I could see people wanting to opt out and say, I don't ever want to use the kops client certificate. Keep me on one listener, and right. I'll deal with that myself.
Yes. The other strategy, which apparently I looked at the basic auth deprecation, is there is still token auth. And so like we could create a static, I see John like getting ready. We could create a static long live forever token that like an enable token auth. I feel like we fought so hard to get rid of token auth, I think, or at least mostly get rid of it. And if basic auth is going, token auth won't be too far behind. So I like the approach that we are pursuing, but I wanted to make sure we were covering it all.
Yeah, and then regarding the NLB support itself, it's supported. The migration works with downtime of a few minutes because of we didn't support the HA where you can specify creating both load balancers. And then it doesn't clean up the old load balancer. So we still need to either implement that or add something in a release notes or something about that.
Yeah, for the beta, I think the release notes is absolutely great there. Well, okay, so it sounds like we have some things to do before the beta, but it sounds like we are mostly de-risked, as in like the biggest problems are done. Thank you to Peter and to everyone that worked on those. And so we should hopefully be able to do a beta ideally next week with some, and there will be some release notes, and I think that's okay if people agree.
Oh, and one more thing. I created a permalink for the ACM cert issue that I'll include in the API validation errors. And
Cool.
so that's in a pull request if people could look that over as well.
Thank you. And all right, well, we are over time. I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to bring up. Otherwise, I know people often have meetings that at this meeting.
Sorry, quick question. I tried to add the EBS KMS key for encrypting the EBS and bumped into a small issue where when we compare expected and actual values, kops ignores expected values which are null. So if your setting or whatever is
Null means I don't care.
yes, but in this case, so setting it is pretty straightforward, but removing it becomes an issue.
Can you use
because
can you use the empty string?
I can try using it. This is what I did to address this, but wanted to know if there is anything better than changing it from pointer to
This
string.
is, I see, yeah.
Because either way, it's an empty string, or you comment it, it's gone. So if you comment that value.
Yeah, so like the difference, if it was on a new cluster, the difference would be null means do whatever is the right thing in terms of our like latest recommendation. Empty string would mean I want the empty string, and a value would mean I want that value. So in other words, it's the difference between like, and a Boolean is easier, right? Like true means yes, false means no, and null means true or false based on what you recommend, like at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of why, we draw the distinction between null and empty sometimes. This is obviously not great UX, particularly if you've already created or bound the key. I suggest as we're over time, let's talk about it next time and maybe file on Thursday and file an issue. And if we want to do it before then, how about that?
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thanks, Sabrina. All right, any last items? Otherwise, see you all in 2 weeks. We're on Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific, and I will put that on calendars. And have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.